Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how I would learn how to code if I had to start all over again. I see a ton of these videos out there and I figured it's about time that I make my own. I learned how to code 7 years ago and a lot has changed since then. So I really sat down for a while and wrote down all the things that I can think of that I would do differently now if I had to learn how to code from scratch and start all over now in 2025. While there's a lot of new tools that can help you learn how to code, a lot of the things are still kind of the same. But I do think that you have to approach things a little bit differently now if you do in fact want to code and get a job. Let's just get right into it. The very first thing that I would do is I would spend as little time as possible learning the basics, because I think what happens is that too many of us spend way too much time learning the basics and learning too much theory and not putting anything into practice because we feel that we need to take in as much information as possible in order for us to feel ready to start actually coding. Instead of spending weeks on beginner courses that just teach you things like syntax, learn the bare minimum that you need to get something to work. Every time you need a new concept like loops or functions, learn it in context of what you're building. Try to practice the 80-20 rule. Learn 20% of the things that you will use 80% of the time. This means that learning one basic HTML course, one basic CSS course, and one basic JavaScript course should be all you need to start building. And as you start coming across things that you need to implement and do as you're building, go back and refer to documentation on the things that you're trying to do. You don't need to learn every single HTML tag. You don't need to learn every single CSS style. You don't need to learn every single JavaScript helper function. Just learn the basics and start building. Once you start working with JavaScript, all you need is variables, functions, loops, and conditionals to build pretty much anything. Learn about data structures and algorithms when you actually need to use them. Don't spend a whole time learning that stuff and grinding LeetCode if you can't even build a project from scratch. And don't waste time on computer science theory until it becomes relevant. Another thing is, don't get stuck in preparation mode, or what I like to call productive procrastination mode. Many beginners spend a whole lot of time trying to get ready to learn how to code. The truth is that even senior level developers Google everything, and now we AI everything, and we use ChatGPT, and we use Claude, and we're using AI in our text editors. So there's more tools that will help you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about AI further into this video, but I just wanted to mention that you can go out and find the answer rather than having to learn the answer before you need to use it. Aim to get to hello world in 1 hour. And if that's hard to understand, hello world is the first thing that everybody prints out when they learn a new programming language. And what I'm trying to say is get to learning how to do the simplest thing first as soon as possible. Obviously, it doesn't have to be in an hour, but try to think of it that way. Start by actually writing code in your first learning session. Don't just watch a bunch of videos on HTML or CSS or JavaScript without actually writing any code. Don't read a bunch of books without writing any code. Don't research a whole bunch of stuff without actually writing any code. Start writing code right away. If you're learning HTML and CSS, this is pretty easy. Once you get to the programming language aspect, try to start printing stuff out in your console or your REPL. These early wins will help you build momentum and encourage you to continue to keep learning. The next major bullet point on my list is going to be focus on one tech stack. Now, this can be tricky for a lot of new beginners because you really don't know what tech stack you should learn. I always suggest trying to do some market research in the job market that you're trying to apply in. So this means go on LinkedIn, go on Indeed, go on Dice, and check your area for the programming languages and the tech stacks that are in high demand. If you're learning web development, you could learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and then go with the whole MERN stack and learn MongoDB and Express and Node.js for your backend. This is a route that many people often take, but I don't always suggest learning that tech stack because it's honestly not in very high demand. But regardless of the tech stack that you pick, you should just stick with the one that you decide to learn from the start and stick with it for a while. As long as the tech stack that you choose is stable, you're gonna be all right. If you're focusing on front-end development, JavaScript and React is usually a safe bet. And if you want to learn full stack, then do some research on the back-end language and the framework that you want to use. Try to commit to at least 6 months of learning this tech stack. I know that might scare a bunch of people away right there. Like,
you mean I really got to spend all of this time learning? Like 6 months is a long time.
Like, yeah, this stuff is hard and you're not gonna learn it in 3 months. No matter what any boot camp tells you or whatever tech influencer tells you that you can learn this stuff fast, the truth is that it takes a while. And I think that 6 months is a reasonable amount of time to dedicate to a specific stack. This gives you enough time to reach real proficiency and understand the framework, and it helps you push through that initial learning curve. And whatever you do, don't jump ship as soon as things get difficult. It's gonna be hard. Just push through, persevere, and try to really understand the tech stack that you want to learn. Then try to master the ecosystem around it. Learn the common tools and libraries that tech stack uses. Learn how to test in that tech stack. Make sure that you get comfortable with the package manager that you'll be using and learn the best practices and patterns of the tech stack that you choose to go with. Study how experts structure their code in that stack that you're using. You can do this by looking for large production projects that are built in that stack and go into their GitHub and seeing how everything's structured. Try to understand why certain patterns are preferred in certain tech stacks. This will set you up for success when you're learning a particular stack. Don't try to just learn stuff at a high level. If you're focusing on a particular stack and building in it for 6 months, you should really get a deep understanding with it. But by the end of that 6 months, you should be comfortable building in the stack and you'll be on your way to becoming a developer. All right, next major bullet point is stay the hell away from shiny objects. You know, developers are really smart, but we're really easy to distract. And every couple months, there's like a new front-end framework, there's a new tech stack that comes out, and you have to learn to control yourself and stay away from these shiny objects. I have another video where I talk about staying away from shiny objects, but I'll talk about it a little bit right now. Just know that new frameworks aren't gonna make you a better programmer, and they might make some things easier, but as a beginner, everything's gonna be hard. So if you think that changing frameworks will make things a whole lot easier for you to understand, it's usually not the case. You're still gonna have a big learning curve since you're just getting started, and things are still gonna be complicated. For instance, I think that Laravel is a great framework, and I think that it is one of the simpler frameworks to jump into. But if you're a beginner, you're not gonna understand what model view controllers are, you're not gonna understand how to set things up in any framework, so whichever framework you jump into is gonna be hard. And switching between frameworks and programming languages is only gonna make your learning process take longer. Remember that core programming concepts usually remain the same for the most part. So that's why you should focus on the fundamentals and the core concepts that you'll be using regularly that will transfer between different technologies and tech stacks and programming languages. New tools are always built on fundamental principles, so make sure that you understand the basics before you start exploring alternatives. Focus on solving problems, not collecting tools for your tool belt. I see a lot of junior developers or beginner developers that have all of these different technologies listed on their portfolio and on their resumes, but I know for a fact that most people who have only been learning for a short amount of time who list a bunch of different technologies and programming languages on their portfolios usually don't even know a single one of them well enough to say that they're proficient with it, and they're just kind of collecting different tools that they may have done one tutorial on or watched one YouTube video on to try to feel like they know more than they actually do, and maybe to try to fluff their resume and experience. But it'll show as soon as you start talking to someone who's experienced with a certain technology that you really don't know what you're talking about. So I think it's better to understand one thing really well than understand 100 things just a little bit. A great way to stay away from shiny objects is to resist the temptation and the FOMO of tech Twitter and YouTube and Reddit and anything else that might try to sell you on learning and using a new framework or programming language that's hot and everybody wants to play around with. FOMO is real, but not every single new framework needs to be learned. The truth is that most game-changing new tools and frameworks and technologies are usually short-lived and temporary at best. It will usually take a long time for these new technologies to become widely used. So trying to pick up every single new thing that comes out isn't gonna make you more marketable to certain jobs unless that one thing that you learn happens to be the next great thing and might give you an edge when you apply for a job that's using that technology. For the most part, a lot of these kind of come and go, and very few stick around for the long term. Focus on your path and your plan. Don't worry about what other people are learning. If you set a goal to learn a certain tech stack in a certain amount of time, the minute that you start looking at other things, you're gonna derail your progress, and that's just not gonna be good because you won't be able to get to where you're trying to be in the amount of time that you set out to do it. Focus on the timeless programming principles. Clean code principles work for any language. Problem-solving skills are universal. Design patterns transcend any trendy tools, and just learn to think like a programmer. And at the end of the day, you just want to stick to your learning path. Figure out the roadmap, figure out what it is you're trying to learn, and just stick to that. The next thing I want to talk about is avoiding tutorial hell. The best way to avoid tutorial hell is to start building right away or as soon as possible. I kind of covered that a little bit in my first bullet point, but I think that tutorial hell deserves its own bullet point because everyone who starts off learning how to code gets stuck in tutorial hell. I did, you're probably going to, even when you hear me tell you not to be stuck in tutorial hell and to start building, you're probably still gonna get stuck in tutorial hell, and it's just something that you're gonna have to try to avoid. And the best way to avoid it is to start building as soon as possible and continue to build. Don't go back to tutorials once you've learned the basics. You're gonna feel like you want to, you're probably gonna think like,
oh man, you know what? I feel like I don't know this well enough. I need to really go and learn it some more.
And then you're gonna stall your progress by going and learning a bunch of stuff that you probably will end up not having to apply right away. You'll get a bunch of theory that you may store some of, but you'll probably lose most of it because you won't use it. So it's best to just avoid going and trying to learn a whole bunch of stuff and just learn through building. If you do end up staying in tutorials too long, try to not stick to the tutorial projects exactly, or build the basic project that they give you and then start making modifications. Start adding your own things to the code. Start reverse engineering the things that you're building and start to break the tutorial a little bit so that you can figure out how stuff works and how you would add to it if it was a project that you were building on your own. This will bring you a little bit more value out of a tutorial if you do get stuck in one. So you can try to add your own features, but eventually you want to build without these tutorials. You want to take off the training wheels. You don't want to get stuck on that hamster wheel of just watching tutorials, buying a bunch of Udemy courses, going through a YouTube rabbit hole and watching 100 videos without building anything. I've already talked about this, but I feel like I really have to drill it in because so many people get stuck in tutorial hell. A really good way to get away from the tutorials is to dive into the documentation. If you're learning a certain technology, if you're learning a certain programming language, then just go to the documentation. All of them have getting started pages. All of them teach you how to start writing and using their technology, their library, their framework, their programming language immediately. And this is what real developers do. Rarely ever do I go and watch a tutorial. I still buy some of them because the road to hell is paved with good intentions and the road out of tutorial hell is paved with building your own projects and reading the documentation. So make sure that you're focusing on building how a developer builds. I know that was long-winded and I feel like I was just reinforcing my first bullet point, but I had to say that about tutorial hell because it gets the best of us. Another major thing that I would start doing if I had to start learning how to code right now from scratch all over again, I would start building and learning in public from the very beginning. It would be one of the first things I did after I completed a few simple courses and I started writing my own code. I'll start committing stuff to GitHub immediately, so you'll have to learn the basics of Git and how GitHub works, but I will start building in public right away. Even if you're not committing your code yet, start talking about this stuff. Share it on Twitter, share it on LinkedIn, share it on YouTube, make a TikTok account, go post about it on Reddit. Just share what you're learning and what you're building in public right away. Share your wins and your struggles. Not only just talk about all the cool stuff that you're learning, but talk about some of the stuff that you're struggling with. It's good to be honest about this stuff. It's also good to actually try to teach the things that you're learning or just talk about them. You don't have to specifically teach things, but if you share your struggles and talk about where you get stuck, it'll help you understand the problems better. And if you do decide to actually share how you did stuff, it'll help you reinforce the things that you learned. And try to connect with other people on your level. This will help you find accountability buddies. This could help you find mentors that might help you. Join Discord servers on different learning platforms or different programming languages and find people that are learning as well and chat with them and see the struggles and victories that you guys share, because it can be very helpful for you to keep you going. And as you do this, I guarantee you that you will eventually build some relationships with some more experienced developers. I love seeing people who are learning how to code. I love when people share this stuff. I was doing mentoring and coaching calls, which I've kind of stopped doing that now, but I had a few people that I was talking to. Shout out to Izzy. He's been posting on Twitter. He's been making YouTube videos, and his progress has been shown from the very start to where he's at right now. And I know for a fact that that dude is getting really close to getting a job because I see him building and I see how he's advancing, and I know that other people see this too. And what's going to help him and what can help others out there is that when he's ready to start applying, he's going to have a portfolio of his learning in public, and people are going to be able to see his progress and to see his journey. And I think that that holds a lot of value. Sure, you could do this with a resume and a portfolio and do it by not building in public, but there's something about seeing someone go through the struggle that really resonates with a lot of people who have gone through it themselves. And if I was hiring a junior developer and they posted about all the stuff that they were learning and I was able to see that progression, it would sell me a lot more on that individual than someone that had maybe the same skill and maybe the same set of projects that they've built that didn't post about all that stuff. There's something about being able to see someone learn and grow that makes you want to actually help them and makes you want to hire them. Now, I want to talk about the big boogeyman in the room. I want to talk about AI. I want to talk about ChatGPT and Claude and Cursor and Windsurf and every other AI tool that can help you learn how to code right now. Embrace it. Use it to help you learn, but be careful because I think that you should still struggle a little bit when you're getting started. It's a slippery slope and it's a balance that you're going to have to find as you use these tools. They're here to stay. Experienced developers are using it, and I believe that people that are learning how to code should use this stuff. And if I was learning how to code right now, I would definitely be taking advantage of these things, but I could see how it could get me caught up in thinking that I know more than I do by letting it do all the work for me. So you want to make sure that when you start using tools like AI, that you are careful with how you use them and that you use it in a way to reinforce your learning and to teach you the things that you're not understanding. Try to chat with it naturally. Try to ask questions on things that you want to understand better. Try to use it as a mentor that can help you with the problems that you're stuck on, but don't use it as a developer that can write all the code for you. So what I'm trying to get at is that you want to ask AI for help, but you still want to figure out stuff on your own. Always try to solve the problems first on your own. Spend a little bit of time spinning your wheels, but don't spin your wheels too much. Try to use the 20-minute rule. When I was learning how to code, this is what senior developers would tell me, and when I was helping junior developers, this is what I would tell them, is that you usually want to spend about 20 minutes on a problem on your own before you go and start asking for help. In the 20-minute rule, you can go try to Google stuff. You can go try to find the answer on your own without the help of AI. After about 20 minutes, if you can't figure it out on your own, it's okay to ask for the answer. This will actually help you learn faster. No developer has ever learned by just getting stuck on something for hours. Usually the aha moment, or when somebody explains it, or when they find the answer, is when they learn that thing. Getting stuck is good because it teaches you how to learn and find the answer on your own, but you don't want to get stuck for too long. So follow that 20-minute rule when you're using AI. Another good thing that you can do with AI is that when you're trying to understand code that is a little complex for you, that's doing a lot of stuff, go ahead and copy and paste that code into AI and have it walk you through it. Have it explain concepts that you don't understand or certain algorithms that you're trying to figure out by breaking them down into smaller digestible pieces and then going line by line and explaining everything it's doing for you. This is a really good way for you to learn how to understand code and understand what complex functions and algorithms are doing. But again, you want to build your problem-solving muscles, right? You don't want to just rely on these tools because it'll make you lazy and you won't learn as much as you should, especially as someone who's just getting started. So learn to solve your own problems if you can. Learn to debug stuff on your own if you can. And if you can't, it's okay to use the tools. Again, I want to keep reinforcing that it's okay to use these tools as long as you feel that you're learning and not just getting the solution handed to you every time, then you're probably using these tools correctly. But just be careful, it's a slippery slope, and next thing you know, you're just pressing tab on Cursor and it's auto-completing all the code for you, and then you're just prompting your IDE to write all the code for you, and then you're not learning anything, and you want to avoid that. I've got only a couple more big bullet points, so just stick with me here, all right? These are gonna be good and they're gonna help you. The next thing is I'm gonna say is start building big projects. What happens with a lot of beginners that happened to me was that the first few projects that you start building off of tutorials are usually very basic. We're talking like simple things like rock, paper, scissors. We're talking things like to-do list and weather widgets and a Pomodoro timer and consuming an API to show a few little things off of a list. While all of these things are kind of like the building blocks that you need to then build bigger things, building too many of these small things aren't going to give you the same value that you would get from building one large project. I recorded a video recently where I talk about this stuff. It may or may not be out when I release this video, but you can check that video out where I go into more detail about these things too. But what I'm trying to say is that you need to start thinking bigger. The industry is changing and the game has changed. The level of what you need to be able to produce as a junior or a beginner programmer is a lot higher now because of the tools that we have, because of the state of the job market. You kind of have to set the bar a little bit higher for what you can build. And I know that a lot of the things that you build early on, like those little widgets, those little small features, the to-do list, and those APIs that you might make, like they feel very hard at first, but you want to take what you learned by building those and then start applying it to larger projects. Try to choose a big project that excites you. You can find a project that you like. You can think of something that you want to build or something that you have thought about building that may feel like it's too big. Start building little by little. With large projects, you always start small, and large projects help you break down bigger problems and you start learning how to actually build real applications. So go find stuff that you want to build, find stuff that excites you and that you would be interested in building. Don't just build something for the sake of building it. You could go and do a Twitter clone or a YouTube clone or a Spotify clone, and you can do all of those things, which are good starting points, but eventually you want to build your own stuff because it'll be more fun for you and it'll keep you more engaged, because nobody really wants to build a Twitter clone, but a lot of people have stuff that they do want to build that's a lot more exciting for them. These larger projects will look a lot better on your resume and your portfolio. I think I mentioned it already before. It's better to build a couple really big things than 100 small little things. And when an employer sees you as a junior developer and they see that you have these large applications that you've built from scratch that are your own, it'll give you a lot of talking points. It'll also make you stand out as a junior developer and somebody who's just getting started when you do start applying for jobs. And it's just going to help you understand how to actually build in the real world, which is something that I think a lot of people, when they're learning how to code, miss out on. I know that I did, and I remember jumping into my first large code base and just feeling overwhelmed. And that's going to lead me into the next bullet point that I have. Something that I wish I would have done when I was learning how to code that I would totally do this time around if I had to start over, is that I would start reading and learning how other people's code works. Most of our time as developers is spent reading code. You will read more code than you write, because when it comes to debugging, when it comes to reverse engineering things, when it comes to understanding a code base, and when it comes to understanding what things are doing within code, you're going to be reading a lot of code. And I did not do this when I was first learning, and I wish I would have, because when I got thrown into a large production application that had a bunch of code and a bunch of files and I was completely lost, I felt overwhelmed because I never spent any time reading other people's code. And the great thing is that there's plenty of open source projects that you can dive into and just check out. You can literally clone any open source repo and start walking through the code. And you should do this in the tech stack that you're familiar with and trying to get a job in. And you want to start seeing how people write their code, and you want to be able to understand what the code is doing. You also want to be able to use your tools in your IDE or in your text editor that help you navigate through code, and learn to use your debugger and learn how to debug code. This is a big one. You want to learn how to be able to step through functions. You want to learn how to actually navigate in between functions and in between files. You usually do this by using the command or the control key and then clicking on the function if you have things like IntelliSense, or if you have the extensions that allow you to do this in VS Code. This is what you want to do, because you're going to spend a lot of time when you're writing code or when you're working in a big production application by clicking and going into the next function. And when you start debugging code and you start stepping through code, it gets very complicated. And those are all things that I wish I would have done way sooner, because I remember the first time I was told to debug something and I had no idea how to do that. Also, if you're in web development, you want to learn how to use your dev tools. These are things that real developers use on a daily basis, and these are things that real developers do on a daily basis. So learn to use your dev tools, learn to use your debugger, learn to debug code, learn to read code, learn to walk through your code, and just stare at code all day, because that's what you're going to be doing as a developer. And then eventually you're going to figure out what fix or feature or implementation you need to add to the code, and then you can add to it. This is all going to help you learn common patterns and architecture. This is going to just help you understand how code works and what it's doing, and it's going to help you understand why some things are written a certain way and why some things are structured a certain way in a project. And then the last bullet point, that's not going to have any more sub bullet points. If I was learning how to code today and I had to start over, and I've said it I think a bunch of times throughout this video, is build, 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 And when you think you built enough, build some more and then keep on building. This is where you will learn the most. And I feel like that's kind of been the theme of this video. But honestly, I wish that I would have built more and I would have learned less when I was learning how to code. There is a time for learning. There's gonna be a lot of stuff that you're gonna need to learn. I know that a lot of stuff that I said in this video might feel like,
yeah, you're telling me not to learn, but I feel like I have to learn.
I get that feeling. I get that you're still gonna go and get stuck in tutorial hell. We're all gonna do that. That's part of the process. But the best way to become a developer is to build and continue building and learn through building and keep applying the things that you're learning into the next thing that you're building, and then build on top of those things, build your own little libraries, reuse your components. If you're in the same tech stack, you'll start building a lot of little helper functions and a lot of things that you can reuse in other projects, and just keep building on top of your skill set, and your skill set will get larger, and then your toolbox will become bigger, and you will eventually get a job and be a developer. And then maybe you'll start telling some junior developer that the best way to learn is to start building, and they're gonna be like, no way, dude, I need to like spend 6 months just watching videos. I think it's just part of the process. Being self-taught is hard, but at the end of the day, the best way to learn is just to build. All right, with all that said, I really hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and go build something. All right, peace. That little piece felt fucking cheesy. All right. All right, that's a wrap.